The smell of softness, there's a silence that doesn't feel like peace. It feels like being erased. The kind of hush that enters a room after you speak, and no one hears you. Not because you were too quiet, but because you were too kind. The camera lingers on a single figure in a crowded hallway. They smile gently at passersby, holding doors, stepping aside, lowering their voice. No one thanks them. No one looks twice. They've become furniture in the landscape of human interaction. Present, but invisible. Somewhere along the way, they were taught, to be good is to be small, to bend is to be loved, to give is to be worthy. But that isn't what the world heard. The world smelled softness. And softness in the wild means one thing: easy prey. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to gain acceptance. At first we choose it, but eventually chooses us. You become the peacekeeper, the pleaser, the ever-agreeing silhouette in the background. And in time, people forget there was ever a person behind the politeness. Only utility remains, because the mask is smooth, convenient, and when it finally cracks, they don't notice the blood. The scene shifts to a metaphor. A man offers a glass of water to everyone who walks by. One by one they take and drink. No one asks if he is thirsty. No one notices his hands begin to shake. When the glass shatters in his grip, they are annoyed at the mess. Compassion, when given without limits, is not admired. It is devoured. Nietzsche warned us of the herd, those who crave sameness, who fear distinction. In their eyes, kindness is not a moral virtue. It is a social signal, a way to determine who can be bent, without breaking. They do not hate you for being soft. They simply know they don't have to fear you. And in a world ruled by fear and admiration, those who aren't feared aren't seen. You become the middle of every sentence, the silence after the joke, the one who says it's okay, even when it isn't. Schopenhauer said, "To suffer without making a sound is the secret of endurance." But here suffering isn't stoic. It is swallowed. It sits like a stone at the bottom of the chest. It's heavy, silent, unmoving. You begin to feel it. In the hesitations you never voice, in the boundaries you never set. Each moment of silence becomes a quiet betrayal of your own dignity, because every time you say yes when you mean no, a part of you disappears. It's not all at once, but like paper fading in the sun. We return to the image of a child. She holds out a flower to a stranger. He takes it with a smile, then turns and drops it into the gutter. This is the first lesson. Not everyone deserves the softness in your hands, and not everyone will protect what you give them. Kierkegaard would call this the despair of the self-forsaken, not because life is cruel, but because you forgot to say no. A paradox emerges. You become loved for the very things that destroy you: your patience, your silence, your self-sacrifice. The world claps for your performance while you bleed behind the curtain. And yet, this is not a call to become cruel, not a demand to extinguish empathy or sharpen your smile into a blade. No, this is the slow-burning realization that in a world of silent predators, to never be weak is not power. It is protection, Alan Watts reminds us. There is no separate self, only flow. But what happens when that flow becomes a flood? When your identity washes away under the weight of never being a problem for anyone else? There is a difference between peace and passivity, between being gentle and being prey. The screen fades to black, then opens on a final image. A lone figure stands still in a crowded marketplace. They're no longer smiling, not angry, just touched, unreachable. And in their eyes, a quiet truth burns. The world no longer smells softness. It smells stillness, and in that stillness, they are finally safe. At the smile that betrayed you, we are taught, from the moment we first speak, that goodness is a kind of armor. That if we are soft, we will be loved. That if we smile, we will be safe. But no one tells you that sometimes the smile becomes a scent. And the world is full of quiet predators who do not roar. They smile back. It begins with a child. Small hands. Open heart. She steps forward in a silent garden, offering a wildflower to a masked stranger. The mask smiles, gentle, warm, approving. He takes the flower, and when the child turns away, he crushes it in his fist. No sound, no blood, It's just petals scattered like innocence on cold stone. In that single moment, something fractures. Not visibly, not violently. Just the subtle realization. Not every smile means safety. Not every outstretched hand deserves to be held. Carl Jung wrote of the persona, the face we wear for the world. The version of us that is shaped by approval, molded by rejection, and polished by fear. The child grows up, learns to smile when she's hurt, laugh at jokes that humiliate her, say yes even when her bones beg for no. She wears the persona like silk, soft, flowing, beautiful, but underneath, her real self begins to wither. Not because it's gone, but because it has not been seen in years. People don't fall in love with her. They fall in love with the mask. When the mask pleases them, they stay. When it doesn't, they vanish. She learns this unspoken law. To be accepted, you must disappear. Piece by piece, smile by smile. Nietzsche warned us about the herd. A collective dream where the dangerous are feared. But the soft are sacrificed, not out of malice, but maintenance. The herd does not protect its gentlest, it feeds on them, because peace must be paid for. And those who can't say no make the perfect offering. The scene changes. A man in a crowded boardroom. He nods. He agrees. He takes on the work no one wants. Speaks last, or not at all. They call him a team player. Till the day he asks for fairness, and is met with silence, not cruelty. Just the sound of the herd withdrawing its illusion of care. In this world, agreeableness is currency, but it has no savings. The moment you stop spending it, you're forgotten. Schopenhauer wrote that suffering is not loud. It is constant, a drip in a cave, a shadow that follows the kindest people. Not because they are doomed, but because their hands are always open. And when your hands are always open, someone will always take. But perhaps the most tragic part is not that others exploit this kindness. It's that we keep offering it as if it will one day save us. Kierkegaard would call it despair, but not the sharp kind. The kind that settles, that whispers. If I'm just good enough, maybe they'll stay. If I just smile more, maybe they'll love me. But they don't love you. They love what you don't resist. They love your absence inside your own skin, Alan Watts once said. The self is not something you find. It is something that arises when you stop trying to be liked. But how many of us ever stop? How many of us dare to be unloved in order to be real? There's a subtle violence in how the world praises politeness, because it knows that politeness, without boundaries, is not virtue. It is surrender, a smiling surrender. And every time you betray yourself to be understood, you are less understood. Every time you wear the mask, you are telling the world, I daren't believe the real me is worthy of this space. The final scene. That same child grown now, she walks through a crowd. Someone bumps her. She does not apologize. Someone asks for her time. She says no. Her face is calm. Still kind, but something in her gaze has changed. It no longer pleads. It does not offer. It simply sees. And those who once saw her as harmless now look away, not in fear, but in recognition. She is no longer furniture. She is no longer prey. She is no longer wearing the smile that betrayed her. The truth is this. In a world trained to manipulate masks, your greatest danger is not cruelty, but perpetual agreement. And your only defense is not anger, but honest presence. You were not born to be soft in every room. You were born to be true, even when that truth is not applauded, even when it is met with distance. Because what protects you is not the mask. It is the refusal to wear it. The slow exploitation weakness is not always met with violence. Often, it is met with silence. Not rejection, but reduction. Not hatred, but hunger. This is not a scene of dramatic betrayal. No raised voices, no slammed doors, only a dinner table. A woman sits at the far end, her plate untouched, her words half-formed, her eyes tracking the sound of everyone else's laughter. She speaks once. No one hears. She smiles politely. They keep eating. Not one of them is cruel. Not intentionally. But they are full. And what they are full of is her. Her presence is not loved, only used. Her kindness, her quietness, her constant, invisible yes, all woven into the fabric of the evening, as unnoticed as the tablecloth. She is tolerated, and only because she does not take up space. And this is how it begins. Carl Jung wrote of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, suppress, disown. But this is something deeper, not the disowning of rage, lust, or ambition, but of being itself. A woman who has learned to survive by disappearing, by folding herself smaller each year, until she could sit at any table, in any room, and never disturb a single thing. She mirrors others, laughs when they laugh, agrees when they speak, feeds their egos like wine from a bottomless carafe. Slowly she forgets the taste of her own thoughts. Schopenhauer wrote that suffering is the essence of life. But not all suffering is dramatic. Some is quiet, glacial, invisible, like rust beneath paint. It takes years before the structure collapses. But the decay began the moment she decided to be polite instead of real. This is the kind of suffering no one will write stories about, because there are no villains. It's only a woman who was too kind for too long. We watch a slow montage. She stays late at work to help others succeed. They forget her name at the promotion meeting. She listens for hours to a friend's heartbreak. But when her own cracks begin to show, the phone is silent. Like space in her life for everyone else's chaos, until there is no room left for her peace. And still, she smiles, because she was taught that to be loved is to be needed. But need is not love. It is appetite. And appetites don't stop because you're tired. Kierkegaard might call this the most dangerous despair of all. Not the kind that howls, but the kind that whispers. Just be easy to love. Don't be difficult. Don't ask for too much. She is not drowning. She is evaporating. Nietzsche warned of the herd, that great suffocating mass where safety is found in sameness. But sameness has a price. She pays it every time she says yes. When her soul aches for no, every time she smiles when she wants to scream, every time she chooses peace that costs her truth. She was not born soft. She was made soft by a world that taught her survival was easier than confrontation. And now, that softness is currency. But she never set the price. They take and take and take, and she lets them. Because she was never taught how to defend something she was never allowed to own. Alan Watts spoke of the illusion of self, that we are not fixed beings, but flowing patterns. But when that flow becomes a mirror for others, you lose the ability to reflect yourself. She no longer knows where she ends and others begin. Identity has become a room full of furniture chosen by everyone else. Comfortable for others, unfamiliar to her. The final scene returns to the dinner table. Same woman, same people, but this time she doesn't speak. Not because she is afraid, but because she is waking up. She looks down at her empty plate, and for the first time wonders why she's still hungry. She rises. No dramatics. No goodbye. Just a quiet departure from the place where she was being slowly and sweetly consumed. In the end, this is not a story about cruelty. It's about absence. It's a slow, imperceptible loss of self in the name of goodness. But goodness, without boundaries, becomes guilt. Kindness, without assertion, becomes currency. And love, when only received through sacrifice, becomes slavery. The world does not take what you protect. It takes what you abandon. And people will keep taking until there is nothing left but a smile and a shadow. When goodness turns into guilt, he apologizes before he speaks. Before he enters a room, before his footsteps even touch the floor. I'm sorry, he says, for being too early, for being too late, for needing anything at all. He bows his head when ordering coffee, smiles nervously in crowded elevators, shrinks slightly when praised, and disappears completely when criticized. He was once told that kindness was a strength, but over time it became a leash, and now it drags behind him wherever he goes. We follow him through a symbolic montage. He folds his opinions like old laundry. He gives compliments like currency. He laughs when something hurts. He apologizes when someone else bumps into him. And slowly, invisibly, he is training the world to see him as optional. To not ask how he feels. To not wonder what he needs. To not even notice that he stopped asking himself. Because what began as empathy has become a prison. Kierkegaard spoke of despair, but not the loud kind. Not the storm. The quiet kind. the kind that smiles through shame, the despair of not daring to exist as you are. Not because you hate yourself, but because you love others too much to inconvenience them with your truth. And so, he begins to trade authenticity for approval, says what they want to hear, becomes who they want to see. And slowly, invisibly, he turns his back on himself in the name of peace. But this peace is not peace. It is the absence of resistance. Alan Watts once said that the self is an illusion, but here we see how the illusion is made, not by ego, but by sacrifice. By softening your voice until it stops being yours. By giving until you forget what it feels like to receive. The illusion is not the false self, it is the missing one. The one buried under years of adaptation, apology, and aching politeness. And in the shadows, something stirs. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the pieces of ourselves we cast away to fit into a world that punishes too much light, too much fire, too much need. There, in that hidden place, live the things he was never allowed to be. Anger, conviction, boundaries, desire. He buried them all, thinking it was goodness. But goodness without force is not goodness. It's performance. It's survival. And now the things he buried have started to rot. We see him at a dinner table. He smiles as someone interrupts him. He nods when a colleague takes credit. He agrees to things that wear him down. When he returns home, alone, in the dark, he feels the bitterness rise. Not towards them, but toward himself, because deep down he knows. This isn't kindness. This is self-betrayal dressed in virtue. Nietzsche warned us. Those who are always agreeable are not noble. They are afraid. The Bermensch is not the one who pleases the herd. It is the one who outgrows it. But he is not there yet. He is still caught in the space between wanting to be loved and fearing to be real. Because realness requires risk, and risk feels like rejection. Rejection feels like death, so he stays silent. He stays soft. He stays small. Until one day, something happens. Friend makes a joke at his expense. Again, a coworker assumes his compliance. Again, stranger crosses his boundary. Again, and something inside him doesn't flinch this time. It burns, not hot, not loud, but slow, like a fuse waking up after years of being soaked. He doesn't say anything, not yet, but the silence is different now. It's not guilt. It's gravity. Schopenhauer believed suffering was the essence of life. But here we see a different kind. The suffering of watching yourself vanish in plain sight. Of watching everyone love the part of you that isn't really you, and knowing deep down that you let them. It's not because you were weak, but because you were kind. And they mistook that kindness for consent. It's a final scene. He stands in front of a mirror, not adjusting, not performing, just looking. The man he sees is tired, but there's something new in his eyes. Not rage, not pride, but readiness. The leash of kindness hangs loosely in his hand now, no longer around his neck. And for the first time in years, he speaks a sentence without apology. I guarantee need to be good for you to be real to me. He walks away from the mirror, not toward others, but toward himself. Because goodness, without boundaries, is not love. It's erasure. And empathy without self-respect is not healing. It's slow collapse. The world does not need another martyr. It needs people who are kind and still whole, who can say yes and mean it because they've remembered how to say no. The abyss watches back. A room silent, sterile, too clean for comfort. In the center, a mirror, tall, unblemished, ancient. A man sits before it. Or perhaps, what remains of a man? He leans forward, eyes hollow, searching the glass. But the reflection does not obey. No face, no form, only fragments. Shards of memory. A smile once forced to keep the peace. A nod given in cowardice. A hand extended when it should have been clenched. The mirror has stopped pretending. This is not madness. This is clarity. The world calls it a breakdown. Philosophy calls it the abyss. Nietzsche whispered it long ago. He who fights with monsters should be careful, lest he thereby become a monster. And if you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you. He once stared into weakness. Now it stares back, with familiar eyes. Not all wars are loud. Some happen in silence. In empty kitchens, in boardrooms, in marriages, in quiet rooms, with good lighting and bad intentions. We are taught that good people endure, but endurance over time curdles into a quiet kind of death, one that smiles, one that apologizes, one that swallows the insult, the betrayal, the abandonment, and calls it being the bigger person. But the shadow remembers. Jung said we bury what we cannot accept, we exile the anger, the boldness, the voice that once screamed, enough, and what we exile festers. Yuck! The man before the mirror has spent years amputating parts of himself to fit the mold, to please the tribe, to be loved, or at least, not rejected. And now the pieces no longer speak. The ego is scattered, the persona, a costume left on the floor. Only the shadow remains, unapologetic, alive. We call them monsters, those who snap. But rarely do we speak of the conditions that built them. 1,000 tiny humiliations, the polite erasures, the spiritual starvation. Schopenhauer wrote that suffering is the substance of life. But this suffering, it's invisible, dignified. It looks like working late so someone else can shine. It looks like saying I'm fine when you're drowning. It looks like clapping for those who took from you, until something inside breaks. Not like a window shattering, but like a bone that quietly gives way. The man in the mirror no longer sees a man, he sees the consequences. Of avoiding conflict, of trading truth for harmony, of being everyone's emotional punching bag so they wouldn't leave. But they always do. Kierkegaard called this despair. Not the suffering of the soul, but the sickness of forgetting you have one. To remain good in a world that rewards performance over principle is to watch the wolves put on sheep's clothing while the real sheep are left bleeding behind closed doors. Even morality, when systematized, becomes weaponized. Who carries the burden of guilt? The empathetic, the sensitive, the ones who over-apologize just to make others comfortable. Society doesn't protect the weak, it uses them. As shields, as scapegoats, as silent witnesses to a cruelty they're too scared to name. And so, the abyss gapes wider, as the one thing darker than cruelty is complicity. To survive, the man must choose. Become numb. A hollow shell, agreeable and dead behind the eyes. Or become monstrous. Let the shadow take the wheel. Speak the truths no one wants to hear. Set fire to the fake peace. Scare people with the audacity of being whole. This is the paradox Kierkegaard warned of. To be righteous, one must often disobey. To be whole, one must walk into the very darkness they were told to avoid. Alan Watts once said the self is an illusion, a construct maintained by perception. But here, in this moment of absolute stillness, the illusion begins to crack. The self was never truly chosen. It was inherited, modeled, adjusted to fit rooms that were too small for the truth. The man rises. His reflection does not follow. Stays seated, still fragmented, still afraid. As the man has finally turned his back to the mirror, he no longer seeks approval. He no longer seeks applause. He seeks integration. It's not to destroy his shadow, but to meet it, to walk beside it, to speak with it like an old friend. Misunderstood, not malevolent. This is not rebellion. This is resurrection. The path ahead is not paved. It's jagged, uncertain, but it is real. And real is better than safe, even if it costs everything. Silence is a weapon. A forest of bare trees stretches endlessly beneath a gray, bruised sky. Snow doesn't fall, it waits. Frozen in the air as if even gravity has forgotten its purpose. Mid the skeletal limbs of winter, a lone figure stands still, cloaked, motionless, listening, not for footsteps, not for danger, but for absence. Because those who have lived through quiet wars know, noise and senti always where the threat lies. Sometimes it's the silence that's armed. In the wilderness, survival isn't earned through volume, it's earned through stillness, through watching what others miss, through becoming less appetizing than the rest. You don't survive by yelling into the void. You survive by not attracting the wolf's gaze at all. In a flickering montage, we glimpse what came before, the same figure, younger, more open. Apologizing in rooms that drained him, explaining himself to ears that were never listening. Giving time, giving trust, giving, until there was nothing left to give. There was a time when kindness was currency. He believed if he gave enough of it, he'd be protected. But people don't protect what they consume. They just grow hungry again. The screen darkens, and when it lights again, we are back in the forest. But the man is no longer hiding. He walks now, deliberate, slow, not to chase, not to flee, but to exist. Without asking permission, this is not cruelty. What is clarity? As Machiavelli warned, power is not in being feared. It's in not being underestimated. The world punished his softness, not with violence, but with expectation. He was taught to feel guilty for refusing, guilty for needing rest, guilty for saying no. And in that guilt, he became a slave to his own goodness. A memory, a dinner table crowded with voices. He declined something, gently. After erupts, not malicious, but invasive. Don't be like that, they say, and he smiles. But inside, a quiet fracture forms. Because every don't be like that is a hammer chipping away at his sovereignty. Now, in the present, in the snow, he doesn't explain anymore. He simply doesn't answer. Jung once wrote that individuation is not perfection. It is wholeness. The integration of the shadow. The acceptance of every disowned part. His anger, his boldness, his desire to disappear, and his primal will to survive, not to dominate, but to define. He is no longer just a good man. He is a complete one. One who does not flinch when met with resistance, who does not bleed when silence surrounds him, because silence is no longer exile, it is armor. A lone wolf appears at the edge of the frame, not threatening, not afraid, just watching. Two creatures meet eyes, and nothing is said. Because in nature, mutual respect is unspoken. You don't survive by barking louder. You survive by proving you are not prey. The camera lingers, and the wolf walks away. The man remains, Nietzsche once said. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. But he also warned of the abyss. The temptation of becoming cold, of turning silence into stone. That's not this man's path. His silence is not bitter. It is anchored. Like a tree that has stopped growing outward and instead burrows down into itself. We return to the metaphor of the court. A king walks into a hall of mirrors. Each pane shows him a version of himself. The obedient son, the clever diplomat, the polite guest, the agreeable servant. But one mirror is cracked. It shows only his eyes, unmoving, unreadable, whole. This is the moment of psychological sovereignty. He is not what others reflect. He is what remains when they stop looking, as Alan Watts said. You are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago.